This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's November 3rd, 2025, and federal courts and the Trump administration are sorting out how benefits to buy groceries are going to be distributed amid the government shutdown. Nearly 700,000 Tennesseans, or 1 out of 10, get some kind of food aid from SNAP. The vast majority of them live below the poverty line. That line, just to be really clear, is very low. That means a household income of less than $30,000 a year for a family of 4. Of those recipients, nearly 500,000 are either kids or adults over the age of 65, some of whom have disabilities. It's hard for states to simply step in and keep SNAP benefits coming through the usual channels. As state officials here said last week, the state doesn't have access to just add money to people's SNAP cards. But in other parts of the country, state leaders decided to get creative, doing things like sending money directly to SNAP recipients or providing aid through community food banks. Tennessee leaders have a nearly $2 billion rainy day fund at hand. But Tennessee won't be touching that fund to help out in what is surely playing out as a crisis in many households. I'm Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The current developments raise a question that's become a regular refrain in recent years. Just what is Tennessee's rainy day fund for if this emergency isn't deemed worth it? Well, I'm one for a backstory, so let's get into how it's worked so far. The Rainy Day Fund is the nickname for what is officially Tennessee's Reserve for Revenue Fluctuation. Since 1998, whenever there's an uptick in tax collections, state law has required that 10% of that growth be deposited into the fund. When there isn't growth, there's a formula for still putting a little something away. It can be used to offset tax revenue shortfalls in tough years or to pay for surprise expenditures. And it does have a spending limit. The max withdrawal is $100 million or half of what's in the reserve, whichever is greater. 2 years after the fund was established, the state had a crisis. To put it in the simplest terms, the financial mechanisms for education and TennCare reached a simultaneous breaking point. And at that point, the Rainy Day Fund was still so new that it wasn't really ready to be of much help, so officials pushed through using other strategies. That meant the fund could just keep building. And from 2003 to 2008, it grew by leaps and bounds. It more than tripled during that period. In 2008, the economy just sort of generally fell apart. The mortgage crisis kicked off the Great Recession, and tax revenues were a mess. It was exactly the kind of situation the fund was designed for. And sure enough, the state did tap into it to keep government running. Going into that crisis, the account had a balance of $750 million. Leaders made annual withdrawals through 2011. The fund dropped as low as $284 million. Then things stabilized. The fund went back into growth mode. And that's been the story ever since. For more than a decade, it's been all deposits, no withdrawals. And this year, the balance is projected to reach $2.2 billion. I think it's probably germane to this conversation to mention that the end of that period of drawing on those reserves coincided with a political shift. From 2003 to 2011, Tennessee had a Democratic governor, Phil Bredesen, but the Republicans were gaining more and more control of the legislature. In 2011, the same fiscal year that we made our last draw on the reserves, Republican Bill Haslam won the governor's office. He was succeeded by another Republican, our current governor, Bill Lee. The GOP gained a supermajority in the state legislature. And as we all know, fiscal policies are one of the key areas where the two parties generally take very different paths. So, back to how the fund has, or rather, hasn't been used. Tennessee did not touch the Rainy Day Fund during the pandemic. The legislature authorized the governor to use it then, but enough federal relief funds came through that the state was able to justify leaving its fund alone. Then came the literal rainy days last year, when the remnants of Hurricane Helene caused devastating flooding in East Tennessee. Some leaders, including Republicans, called for the state to use the fund to offer relief to individuals, businesses, and local governments in their rebuilding efforts. But it wasn't touched, and relief dollars were found elsewhere. And now, as I said before, officials have made it clear they aren't going to use it to help offset the pause in federal food benefits either. So you may be asking, What does qualify as a rainy day in the eyes of Tennessee's current elected leaders? Why are we saving billions of dollars if we aren't going to use it in times of costly emergencies? Why not tap into that fund to make sure kids and elderly folks don't go hungry? Well, generally speaking, when that question is asked out loud, the response from officials is either silence or deflection. But back in 2021, Governor Lee did make a fairly explicit statement on the topic. He said, quote, "A rainy day fund should be used for the most catastrophic events. It takes legislative approval and would be the last used funds when there are no funds left to keep the state operating." In other words, he doesn't believe it's there to help Tennesseans deal with disastrous problems. In his interpretation, it's only to keep the wheels of state government turning. In the meantime, there is one kind of value to the fund when it's just sitting there collecting money. Bond rating agencies really like to see a high balance in those accounts. The bigger the reserves, the more likely a state is to get a good credit rating. And that matters when it comes to issuing bonds, which is one of the ways the state can fund special projects. That said, a recent report from the Pew Charitable Trusts finds those agencies do appreciate seeing a state use its fund when appropriate. As long as there's a solid mechanism for rebuilding the fund once the crisis is over, the way Tennessee did after using reserves during the Great Recession, the agencies generally seem to appreciate seeing a state use that savings to keep things on an even keel. But again and again, when situations seem to be tailor-made for an infusion of cash from state reserves, the Pew report suggests officials in many states still seem to be gun-shy for fear of hurting that bond rating. In just a few minutes, correcting the narrative around an often maligned animal, the beaver. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together. A themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. People across Middle Tennessee are struggling to pay for food. The federal government has been shut down for more than a month. There's uncertainty hanging over the food assistance program known as SNAP. The Department of Agriculture planned to withhold about $8 billion in payments for SNAP until federal judges ordered the administration to make them. Local food bank managers are nervous. Lucy Keel, president of Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee, says her organization helps 46 counties in Tennessee and will face an impossible task.
We collectively, no matter how hard we come together, we cannot fill this gap.
Even with the new court ruling, there's still uncertainty on when the administration will make the SNAP payment or whether it will provide full SNAP benefits for this month. The city of Nashville and the Second Harvest Food Bank started a fundraising campaign Friday to make up losses. Nashville Social Services Department also launched a food crisis plan to provide food boxes and meal programs to residents and Metro employees. More Tennesseans are expected to go without health insurance if Congress allows enhanced subsidies to expire at the end of the year. The additional subsidies provided during the pandemic led to a spike in Tennesseans buying coverage through the ACA marketplace. Mandy Spears of the Sycamore Institute says the biggest gains were from people who live just above the poverty line.
So these are folks that don't necessarily have a ton of money, and so they're going to be a lot more price sensitive. So when the prices of these premiums go up, they are going to be more likely to probably drop that coverage altogether, and they may not have an affordable alternative option.
Spears tells our midday show This is Nashville that many people contemplating dropping coverage are likely younger and healthier, which will have a compounding effect. The folks remaining on ACA marketplace plans will be older and less healthy, driving up costs to insurers. In preparation, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee has already announced a rate hike of more than 40% for 2026. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the longtime Maryland resident erroneously deported to El Salvador earlier this year, will be back in Nashville this week. A multi-day hearing is set for tomorrow and Wednesday in a criminal case brought by the Trump administration, which has sought to deport Abrego Garcia a second time. The Tennessee Lookout reports that on Friday, a federal judge approved his transfer from immigration detention in Pennsylvania. The hearing in Nashville concerns a 2022 Tennessee traffic stop. The judge in that case found last month that the federal indictment was likely vindictive. Folks at Fort Campbell are getting ready for a homecoming. The reduction of U.S. troops in Europe means the 101st Airborne's 2nd Infantry Brigade combat team is redeploying to its home base. The 101st has been rotating groups through a Romanian posting for several years. This time, the team that's coming home will not be replaced. More than 14,000 property owners have filed appeals challenging Metro Nashville's new property assessments. That's because higher valuations have prompted concerns, including from Tennessee's House Speaker, who says higher tax bills might strain some businesses. In a statement, Metro Property Assessor Vivian Wilhoit encouraged timely appeals from folks who disagree about their property value, saying it's their right. An independent board has been working through what Wilhoit called the unprecedented 14,000 formal appeals for months. Property owners will also be able to file informal reviews starting in January. One point of contention has been that the new valuations on some downtown Nashville bars are significantly higher. In her statement, Wilhoit argues that's because they received discounted values in 2021 due to the pandemic. Nashville's most famous Major League Baseball player, Mookie Betts, can add another historic moment to his resume. The 33-year-old John Overton High School grad won his 4th World Series on Saturday. That makes him the only active MLB player with 4 titles. Despite having mixed success through the 7 games, Betts was in the spotlight on the final play. He fielded a bouncing ground ball and turned a double play for the last 2 outs. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Tennessee is home to a healthy beaver population, which sometimes draws complaints from landowners who are concerned about flooding and property damage. Our northern neighbor, Kentucky, is one of the places where conservation groups are working to shift the narrative surrounding North America's largest rodent. From member station WKYU, Derek Parham reports.
Historically, beavers have a bad reputation. They've been labeled nuisance animals, damming rivers and streams, causing floods on roadways and fields, and damaging trees in their pursuit of food and shelter.
Like many other places around the East Coast, around the entire country, beavers were considered a nuisance species, even here at Bernheim.
Evan Patrick is a natural areas manager and founding member of the Beaver Brigade at Bernheim Forest, which covers 16,000 acres of woodland south of Louisville. The brigade is a volunteer group looking to shift the narrative surrounding America's largest rodents.
Allowing beavers to build dams and create beaver wetlands can increase biodiversity by up to 100-fold. That's emergent and wetland plants, that's things like birds, other aquatic mammals like otters and muskrat, invertebrates. It's an incredible increase in biodiversity, and so that's why we want to allow them to continue to create dams within the Arboretum.
Until recently, Bernheim's beaver management looked similar to the rest of the country. Relocate them when they're found on park property. After several decades, the conservation team realized that strategy wasn't working.
That space, that void will be filled by another individual. The other issue is that beavers operate in family units, and so it's frequent that when an individual is captured and relocated, that they don't survive, or there's a high mortality rate because they rely on their other family members to survive and to thrive.
Over the last 5 years, the park has built up their infrastructure to work with their beavers rather than against them, educating landowners, conservation groups, and the public on the benefits of coexisting with wildlife rather than clearing native species from their property.
But we also moved into the realm of coexistence, where we are installing infrastructure that allows beavers to still exist and create high-quality habitat, but we get to control how high the water level is, and they're not damaging constructed infrastructure. So we're protecting trails, we're protecting our roads, we're protecting our culverts, but we're also getting all the ecological services and the benefits from the beavers.
With the support of national groups like the Southeast Beaver Alliance and the Beaver Institute, the Beaver Brigade has installed wooden stakes made of beavers' preferred food and enhanced dam and lodge sites that draw the park's beavers where their activity would be beneficial. Conservation Director Andrew Berry says Bernheim's Harrison Fork stream restoration has used those same methods to bolster the park's biodiversity.
It's an incredible process. That project took 12 years to get started, and now it's going to take probably 2 years for the construction, the revegetation. It'll take another year for it to heal and all that stuff to get really established and growing. And so we're looking at 15 years to get to the point where we think beavers are going to come in and do something incredible, almost like a second phase.
That effort isn't just happening at one forest, it's a nationwide movement. While it's a slow process, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife fur bearers biologist Laura Palmer says they've also worked with landowners to steer away from relocation.
I try to not refer to wildlife as nuisance animals, but there are definitely occasions when they do cause problems. They can flood roads, damage crops and timber and things like that. But by and large, we try to encourage people to kind of live with wildlife.
Across the country, Patrick says Bernheim's efforts are proving in real time the benefits of native species and fueling policy changes for their protection.
That is part of the process that Southeast Beaver Alliance is working on now, too, is publishing statements and comments for state wildlife action plans to include language about the ecological benefits of beavers. That's that piece of policy changing that Bernheim, Southeast Beaver Alliance, and the Beaver Institute are all working toward.
The efforts of the Beaver Brigade, the Southeast Beaver Alliance, and the Beaver Institute have made their way across the region to state wildlife action plans in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Mississippi, and to the annual BeaverCon Educational Conference in Minnesota. I'm Derek Parham in Bowling Green.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. Thanks to everyone who gave last week during our fall fundraising sprint. If you didn't get around to making a gift then, it's never too late. You can make a donation now at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.